Drop it. It's a power panel. Okay. Michael Schur, Cenk Uygur, Sarah Jones is here, everybody. Okay. So, and Anna Conspiracy here. Okay. So, quick intro of Sarah, because you know the rest. Tony and Obie award-winning playwright and performer, not a big deal. UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, not a big deal. Known for her multi-character, one-person shows, including Bridge and Tunnel, originally produced by Oscar winner Meryl Streep, not a big deal. Critically acclaimed in every instance, not a big deal. Multiple shows at the White House.
The old White House.
Yeah, that's very important.
Very important.
Yes.
Well, nobody does shows at this White House.
No, there are no. This White House is the show.
Right.
Is the
Fox
show.
and Friends is the only show that's at the White House. Jank trivia. The Obie goes to.
Okay, so no, we ran out of time because I was going to ask Sarah before the show. Man, this sounds really impressive. But what's an Obie?
I knew it. It's Star Wars related. No, it's not.
It's very easy if you think about it. O-B, theater.
No, still don't get it.
We're going to end up with like a Tampax show. Oh, top of the power.
I didn't say method. I said theater.
No, it's off Broadway. But and the show I'm doing now here in LA is the show I premiered it off Broadway. It's called Sell by Date, and it's at the Geffen in LA right now.
Yeah. But it's a play on words. It's sell by date.
Right.
Okay, so. We talked about it in a post game. Anna and I did. Anna went and loved it. My wife went and loved it. So I'm looking forward to
You're
going.
Next, buddy.
That's right. Yeah. Michael, you want to be my date?
Sure. I'd love to be.
That's exactly in
You're
keeping
my
with the
sell
show.
by date.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can end right there.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're done, everybody.
Have a good week.
All right, I need people to admit that they look forward to Fridays because they look forward to me saying drop it.
And that's what everyone looks forward to. I mean, the rest of the week is really irrelevant.
TGIDI.
Fear not. Friday has arrived. We have dropped it, and we can proceed forward.
Yes.
So, Sarah, great to have you here.
Thank you.
And
Good to be here.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of everybody here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for keeping the sanity alive.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know someone is a true fan of the Young Turks when they know the resume of Michael Schur. So
Yeah, that was weird.
yeah,
I didn't mean to freak
Either
you
with
out.
NSA or she's a young person.
So you know where I went to high school. This is off air before we got started. But you were in good company, though. One other person that I've talked to that was like a deep, like knew the resume of Michael Schur inside and out was Mark Hamill.
There you go.
So also related to
the
Obie.
Yeah.
There you go. I was gonna say it's full circle.
We're all the way
bringing
back.
Star Wars all the way through. J.J. Abrams is probably gonna pop through the door
Any minute.
second.
You never know. All right, we got a big show. So Anna, let's do it. Let's kick it off.
All right. A federal court has ruled against an Obama-era regulation that would essentially keep a close eye on financial analysts and ensure that they sell products that keep the best interest of the consumers in mind. Now, these are non-fiduciaries, essentially individuals who don't have any particular credentials to be selling you these products, but they are salespeople who have titles such as financial analyst, financial advisor, financial consultant, financial planner, investment consultant, and they previously, prior to these Obama-era regulations, had no obligation, no legal obligation to sell you products with your best interests in mind. In fact, oftentimes they would sell retirement products to consumers that would not help them, but would give them commission and also give them other financial incentives to sell those products. Now, in 2016, Obama's administration did implement some regulations to ensure that these individuals worked in your best interest. And yesterday, a federal court decided to rule against those regulations. Now, let me give you those details. In a 2-to-1 ruling, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said the fiduciary rule requiring financial investment advisors to act in the best interest of their clients bears the hallmarks of, quote, unreasonableness and constitutes an arbitrary and capricious exercise of administrative power.
So I just want to pause there, Anna, because I think that's so important. And I think that goes to the heart of not just this case or this issue, but it goes to the heart of the problem in our government. So it was 2 judges appointed by Republicans, and hence the corrupting of the judiciary. It's not that Republicans can't appoint judges, of course they can. But what they're doing is they're selecting judges that are only pro-corporate, based on their track record of being pro-corporate. In fact, Neil Gorsuch got the Supreme Court nomination because he was the only judge in the country that ruled that a corporation has the right to order one of their workers to freeze to death and then fire him if he disregards that order. That's an amazing ruling. Every other judge that looked at that case said no, but that was Gorsuch's way of saying, I will do anything for multinational corporations, and that got him the Supreme Court seat. So we have pre-selected these judges to make insane rulings like this. So what they ruled was, it is unreasonable to expect that a financial advisor would have your best interests in mind. The reasonable position would be for them to rob you blind. And so like for them to care about you, their customer or their client, and for the government to protect the citizens is totally unreasonable. And that is the corporate position. It's unreasonable for us to sacrifice even a penny of our profits to look out for our customers or clients.
Right. So let's quickly hear from the judges that ruled against the regulations. One of those judges was Judge Edith Jones, who was nominated by Ronald Reagan. And here's what Judge Jones had to say. Only the Department of Labor's semantically created world, in their semantically created world, do salespeople and insurance brokers have authority or responsibility to render investment advice. The Department of Labor interpretation in some attempts to rewrite the law that is the sole source of its authority. This it cannot do. I don't even understand that attempt at logic, because there was no logic there. These are people who previously, prior to these regulations, did not have to disclose conflicts of interest when selling certain retirement products and pushing for certain investments, which, by the way, in a lot of cases, these investments would work against their client. It would actually decrease the amount of money that they would have in the long run for their retirement. But they didn't have to disclose the conflicts of interest. They didn't have to disclose the incentives that they were given to sell those terrible products to these consumers, right? And also, they would charge fees. And the regulation essentially took care of or prevented them from charging certain fees that, again, in the long run would amount to a considerable amount, that you wouldn't be able to retire with as much as you could had you known, what was at play behind the scenes. So it was providing oversight, but more importantly, it was providing information to the consumer so you knew what conflicts of interest were at play and the types of fees you were being charged. So this is crazy.
It's insane. I keep thinking, the whole point of government is to protect people from the duplicity. This isn't just duplicitous, this is criminal, right? Like this is, it's the potential to sort of grift. We're like saying grifting
But even if
American.
it's just duplicitous.
Right, even if it were
it's
just
most
duplicitous.
mild.
Right,
yeah.
right. And I grew up, my parents are both doctors. If there weren't if a doctor could just be like, hey, I'm just gonna maybe give you something that might kill you, and not tell you that if it's gonna make a lot of profit with a pharmaceutical company, although that's kind of happening. But anyway, that's where we are.
Well, we used to have a lot of laws protecting consumers, like a lemon law, for example. A car salesman couldn't sell you a car that he knew didn't function. So that's just a car, right? But you could lose your whole savings, and corporate judges view it wholly unreasonable to expect that they tell you the truth about it. So one of the things that they do that Anna was referring to is excessive trading. So when they do excessive trading, they take commission on each trade. As an example, it's one of the many things that could be done. And every time you're losing that money and they're gaining that money. So they've rigged that system so that at the end of the day, thank you very much for investing with us. We now have your money and you don't. Not the whole principle, obviously, but it's a way of milking you for their profit without telling you. And if we could have a lemon law about cars, you could certainly have it about your retirement and your accounts and your entire savings accounts.
Well, think about who they prey on. They prey on retirees, like you were just saying.
That's absolutely right.
It's the people that are most vulnerable, most, in some cases, most gullible because they're not as comfortable with these things, and I'm generalizing, but that's true. One thing to point out, Anna, before you go on, is that this is the Fifth Circuit. It's a 2-to-1 decision. The Fifth Circuit earlier this week gave another 2-to-1 decision in favor of the state of Texas against sanctuary cities. Both of these, so you're not in the 9th District anymore. You're not in this favorable court, but these are both 2-to-1 decisions. In the sanctuary cities case in Texas, they are going to appeal for an en banc hearing, which is all 9 members, or all, I guess, 7 members, is it? I'm not 7 or 9 members of an appeals court. And they're probably going to want to do that in this case as well, because this is what you have with these circuit appeal courts. When they know they can get a good decision, they get a smaller number. They go to a 2-to-1.
So 2 things that I want to point out. One in regard to what Cenk mentioned. So the constant trading that you were referring to, Cenk, is something that's actually pushed toward consumers. So they're referred to as active management or active funds or annuities. And the whole point is so they do constant trading. And again, that's when the individuals doing the trading on your behalf make money, but it doesn't necessarily work toward your best interest or in your best interest, because you will likely lose money when there's that much activity going on. Now, to your point, Michael, something interesting did happen. Now, even though this court ruled against the regulations, another circuit court also made a decision on this regulation that was completely different. And so this is likely to go to the Supreme Court, which isn't necessarily good news considering we have a conservative Supreme Court currently. Now, another circuit court decision has taken an opposite track, meaning the continuing fight could be headed to the Supreme Court. Now, another piece of info that you should know is that the SEC is trying to draft its own version of regulation in response to this. The SEC said it is writing its own version of a best interest standard for brokers. The SEC's rule would likely try to raise the standard of care that brokers must currently meet for all accounts while preserving their ability to charge sales commission and sell in-house products. So obviously we don't have a version of that regulation at the moment, but we'll see how that turns out.
And full disclosure, Edith Jones, the judge, no relation. No relation.
No.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to recuse yourself from this story.
Thank goodness.
See, because we take our ethical responsibility seriously.
Very seriously. That's right.
Okay. And one last thing, those words that she used, Edith Jones used, just really struck me. And again, it goes to the heart of what's wrong with the system. She deemed the attempt to protect consumers as arbitrary and capricious. Like almost a slap in the face, saying, how dare you try to stand up for the citizens? No, the corporations rule us all, and they can do anything they like. They can trick you, they can take your money, they can lie to you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if the government tries to stand up for you, in the rare cases that it tries to stand up for you, we will deem it arbitrary and capricious. How dare they?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not moving to Canada yet, but I'm just saying, I'm glad you're here.
So the best way to protect yourself is to go to a fiduciary. When you're getting financial advice, make sure you're going to someone who actually does have, by law, has your best interest in mind. Okay, let's move forward. Let's talk about our homie, Scott Pruitt.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
No relation. Definitely no relation. I'm not even Pruitt Jones. There's no relation.
Members of the White House and individuals in the Trump administration are going to extreme lengths to cover up certain meetings that they're having. They're not being very transparent about the meetings they take and the types of topics they discuss. But a recent lawsuit revealed that Scott Pruitt had been meeting with a coal executive who had raised over $1 million for Trump's campaign back in 2016. His name is Steve Chancellor, and he is the CEO of White Stallion Energy.
Wow.
Can't make that up. You can't.
So here's what we know so far. First of all, the Sierra Club really came through with ensuring that we had access to this information. Records obtained by the Sierra Club through a Freedom of Information lawsuit against the EPA show that Stephen Chancellor, CEO of White Stallion Energy, met with Pruitt on May 22nd of 2017 for a courtesy call and introductory meeting, which is fascinating. I feel as though they might have already met, but okay. Now, Chancellor petitioned the EPA back in December of 2016, asking the agency to soften a rule designed to curb pollution that floats across state lines. The EPA has not yet responded to his petition or any of those regarding the update the agency confirmed. Now, keep in mind that Chancellor has been an avid supporter of Trump. He hosted a $10,000 per couple fundraiser with Trump, Mike Pence, and Rudy Giuliani back in August of 2016. And he said that he had raised north of $1 million. He later attended Trump's inauguration, where he was spotted shaking hands with Pence. In fact, we have that video for you just to show you what that scene was like. So these are all buddies. These are all people who very clearly want to deregulate the energy or the coal industry as much as possible. And it's something that the Trump administration and the EPA specifically seems willing to do.
He looks like he's from Vegas.
He does look like he's
going
from
to do a
Vegas.
magic trick, and this is the magic trick.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Bilk America out of its like environmental safety.
Right.
For money.
While your democracy's gone.
Yeah.
And another rule that we find out through this story is that conservatives must name things with either the word white or the word black in it. And his previous company was Black Beauty Coal.
Right, both Black Beauty, a black stallion,
That's right,
and he calls this a white stallion. So he likes children's
There's
books.
a theme.
Okay, well, that's one way of looking at it. Okay, so there's a couple of angles to this story. One is the secretive nature of the meetings. So if you were doing nothing wrong, there's no reason why you wouldn't tell people who you're meeting with, including business interests. So if I was running the EPA, and imagine that for a moment, would I meet with business people? No, I would shun them. No, of course I would. I'd meet with environmental groups, I'd meet with business groups, I'd meet with citizens, and I'd try to have a well-balanced policy that takes all that into account, and I wouldn't hide it because that'd be a normal thing to do. So why is Pruitt hiding it? It's not like we don't know that Pruitt is meeting with business interests. What he doesn't want you to know is the specific business interests he's meeting with that have given specific donations to Donald Trump and other Republicans, because it's embarrassing, because it shows you the actual game that's being played. So now this guy has given a lot before. He also had raised over $310,000 for George H.W. Bush, so going all the way back there. Raised more than $1 million for Mitt Romney, and the list goes on. Now, he doesn't raise money for those guys because he thinks coal is really good for your health, and these guys would be pro-health, and he just cares so much about America and charity that he's doing this. No, he comes in with a very, very specific request. My industries pollute the rivers and the waters and the air, and I would like that pollution to be able to float into your state. Okay, so I want to deregulate this specific thing so I can make more money. And I believe that the money that I spend on politicians is gonna get me a great return on investment. So I give you $1 million, you deregulate, thereby I don't have to do any of the safety stuff. That saves me millions upon millions of dollars. The reason that business interests give money to people like Scott Pruitt and Donald Trump is because they make more money by capturing the government. This is how our democracy dies.
Yes, I just have to say, the Scott Pruitt, just his name, I mean, it basically becomes the Environmental Pollution Agency. It's EPA doesn't stand for protection, right? It doesn't, I mean, this is a person who sued the EPA himself repeatedly to make sure none of the exactly what you're talking about, Jen. So I just sort of feel like the fact that he's, in this position, I'm not surprised at any Vegas types that are, kind of coming in for the spoils, because they're all available now.
In fact, it's funny you should mention that. One of the other folks that Pruitt is meeting with is investors connected with Republican mega donor Sheldon Adelson, who runs a lot of Vegas casinos, is a billionaire from
and puts a ton of money into the Republican pockets, and he also is the person that everyone who's running for office on a federal level, and as a Republican, wants to get in good favor with. Pruitt is supposed to be setting himself up to run for the Senate. I mean, this is all taking place in Indiana. He's from Oklahoma. James Inhofe is, ancient and probably will not run again in 2020. Maybe that's the seat he wants. But a Republican needs to raise $7 in Oklahoma to win a Senate race.
Yeah, but Adelson gives sometimes $25 million at a time because we just have an open auction right now for seats. So if you're in good with Adelson or even Stephen Chancellor, who gives him, can raise $1 million at a time, winning a Senate seat in Oklahoma gets a lot easier. Although I do like what Michael's saying about Inhofe retiring. I mean, from your mouth to God's ears.
Well, Inhofe retiring to make way for Scott Pruitt.
Well, you never know. In Oklahoma, we've had a lot of Democrats win special elections.
That's true. I'm not arguing. I'm just saying that if Scott Pruitt is so well financed in Oklahoma, Republicans tend to do well there, better there than any state in the country.
So one other person that he met with that I found amusing is. He met with a group, Family Research Council, led by Tony Perkins. Okay, wait, this is the EPA. So, I mean, maybe the education department, although I don't want him anywhere near the education department, but I don't, like the EPA, why are we meeting with the so-called family values guys who now, because they support Trump, hate family values? Okay, but like, wait, how does hating gay people have anything to do with environmental protection? And that goes to Michael's point. He's not actually running the EPA. He's running for Senate. He's trying to find all these different donors and allies for his own purposes.
And listen, I have to add something else to that very quickly. Scott Pruitt, it has been said now, there were rumors that he was going to become Attorney General should Jeff Sessions step down. It has now been widely reported that those rumors began with Scott Pruitt. So he's been floating his name as the heir to the Sessions Attorney General seat should Trump, as some are predicting, fire Jeff Sessions.
So apparently John Kelly had to call him and tell him, cool it, we got it, you're the one, you're in it for yourself, which given John Kelly's boss is a hilarious criticism of someone. Right?
He should know.
Yeah. And I like the euphemism they're using for these meetings with enormous donors. It was a courtesy call. I know. Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, if a dude gives you $1 million, you do owe him the courtesy of a call.
Very courteous.
And that's exactly what's wrong with this system.
All right, we got to take a break. Let's do that. And when we come back, I'm going to show you just how fiscal conservatives in the Trump administration really are.
Oh boy, this will be good.
All right, back on the Young Turks. I love these tweets that were sent in. Adam wrote this, I think before I said it, so we're thinking along similar lines. Sorry about that, Adam. Anyway, Blackwater, white fish, and now white stallion. Corruption in the Trump administration is literally right there in black and white. Yeah. Oh, nice. Well done, and a better ending than mine. Carlos Dangerous says, it appears the best way to ensure that you're not getting screwed over by excessive stock market trading is to be too poor to own stock. So that's one way to go. Okay.
The silver lining playbook there.
That's right. Lucifer says, damn right I wait all week for Drop It. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Can I make a quick comment about the previous tweet, saving money for retirement and everything? But just think about that for a second. Like the right wing wants to do away or privatize Social Security, which is the only form of retirement that isn't associated to risk and predatory behavior outside of our politicians, right? And it's terrifying. So you have these Americans who are responsible, they're scraping by, they're putting money aside for retirement, then you have these freaking predators taking advantage of them and charging them fees and not disclosing their conflicts of interest. And it sucks that we have judges that would rule against regulation to protect us.
That's a great point, Anna. It's a double whammy.
Yeah.
If they privatize Social Security, now they have no responsibility to make sure that you actually save money.
Right.
In fact, they are empowered by the judges to rip you off any way they like. And I like me getting excited that Lucifer looks forward to Fridays on the Young Turks. Anyway, Sexy Speed Racer says, loved Annie Kasparian's eye roll when Cenk almost forgot to introduce her.
I roll my eyes at you a lot.
Yes, indeed, that's right. And then one last one, Freedom Tide connects all the Star Wars analogies together. A comment on yesterday's story about conservatives' brains being different. Fear is the path of the conservatives. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to Republicans manipulating everybody's fear. The cycle just repeats continuously. So a little bit of Yoda in there, and unfortunately, a very accurate portrayal of what's going on with conservatives today in America. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. Turns out that members of Trump's administration are spending a considerable amount of money on nonsense. Let me give you a few examples. First, we could never forget the reason why Ryan Zinke, who was the Secretary of the Interior, why he decided to resign. He had spent a lot of money on flights about, I'm sorry, Tom Price. I'm mixing up all these clowns.
What did we? I just grabbed my phone to look. Wait a second, Zinke resigned.
I had Zinke on the mind because he's also in this story, but I meant Tom Price. So
you're doing Monday's story.
They're all in. It's all in it.
He's being fired next week.
Yeah, exactly. Just wait for which firing why.
All right, let me backtrack. Sorry about that. I don't want to confuse anyone. Okay. Several members of Trump's administration have been caught spending a considerable amount of taxpayer money on nonsense. We can't forget Tom Price, who had to resign after he was found to spend $900,000 on airfare in a mere 7 months. But now we have a bunch of other examples that I think the American people should know about. So for instance, Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke spent $139,000 on 3 sets of doors. Those must have been the best doors made of the best solid wood imaginable.
Well, you know what? Maybe those are the same kind of doors that Trump wants to test out for his wall. Because you remember, he said, I mean, we're going to have a big, beautiful door on the wall. So Zinke's Secretary of the Interior. The door faces the interior.
It's also, he's the Secretary of the Interior Design.
Okay, that's what was left out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'm obsessed with interior design. There's no way those doors cost like a total of $139,000. There's no way, unless those were the largest doors made of the most luxurious wood. And maybe they had to do construction in the doorway in order to accommodate the doors. It just doesn't make sense. $139,000.
There were 6 of them. Let's be fair.
6 doors.
Okay, 3 sets of doors.
3 sets of doors.
Okay, but no, there's a real reason, by the way. So it's not that he wanted his doors to smell of rich mahogany. Okay, it's that both him and Pruitt, who got a phone booth that I think you're going to tell us about a little bit later, want secrecy. So they want to make sure that no sound gets out. Gee, I wonder why. Because you know, when you're doing above the board deals, you care a lot about sound leaking from your office, right? No, when you got the donors in and you're saying, thank you for the legalized bribe, now what can I do for you? And cutting shady deals, then you need doors with tremendous soundproofing to make sure nobody hears.
But still, even with the soundproofing, not buying it. Just not buying it.
Of course not.
Yeah. No. Well, I'll give you some other examples, and Cenk quickly mentioned this. Scott Pruitt spent $43,000 on a phone booth. I don't know what that means either. Okay. So, like, did he want to go retro and
maybe it's for his magic act. I think it's for his magic act. I think there's an assistant in there, he cuts in half. It's probably an exotic animal as well.
I got a different theory. I like all our theories. It's cosplay. He dresses up as Superman, but doesn't want to let people know. And every afternoon he's like,
I can't imagine him as Superman. He's got to be the evildoer.
Yeah. Maybe it's for Lex Luthor dress up day. But again, in all seriousness, the phone booth makes no sense in the year 2017 unless you need a place to make phone calls where no one can hear you. And Scott Pruitt is also the guy that is in the news today because he won't reveal his meetings with people that come into his office because he's worried you might find out the deals that he's making.
Right. Look, and by the way, of course, you look at these numbers and they seem ridiculous, but when you look at the grand scheme of things and how much money our government spends in taxpayer dollars, it doesn't seem like it's much, it's just a drop in the bucket. But the point is, these are the same people who will turn around and talk about cutting entitlement spending, right? By the way, they're entitlements because we've paid into them with our taxpayer money. They talk about cutting those entitlements, and then the stereotype on the right wing is that people don't want to work, people are wasteful with their money, they're irresponsible. I mean, you don't think $43,000 for a phone booth is irresponsible, or $139,000 on 3 sets of doors? And then this is my personal favorite. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Ben Carson spent $31,000 to order a new dining room set. So the backstory to this is even more fascinating. So the HUD office had a dining room set that was old, admittedly. It was from 1988. And
wow.
well, I mean,
I thought you were going to say like it was from Andrew Jackson era. Okay, 88. I made it to college in 88.
In 88, Jack Kemp was the Secretary of HUD, former NFL player.
Yeah.
But you get what I mean. It was scuffed up. I saw photos of it, and I was like, okay, I get it. They do need a new dining room set. I get it. But okay, so $31,000 for a dining room set seems outrageously expensive. I don't buy it. I don't think dining room sets cost that much. I don't care how nice and luxurious it is. But when Ben Carson was asked about this, he was like, I had no part of this. I didn't even know about it. I didn't play any role in picking out.
How did that get there?
And then emails revealed that he and his wife chose this dining room set.
Like personally chose it.
Yes.
And that makes
But to be fair to Ben Carson, he might have been asleep when he wrote that.
He might have been asleep.
You're right.
Just like under the table itself. He might have been just curled up right under that table. Going,
That old ratty table.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, that's the best and the worst one because it's the best because. I mean, when you compare it to $139,000 for doors, this is going to be used every day. They didn't need a new dining set. Of course, $31,000 is absurd. It's government money, but it's also the worst because he just lied.
Right.
He just plain lied about what happened.
So we're going to get to Mnuchin in a second, but I can't get off of Ben Carson for a second, okay? Because, so look, I actually think the $31,000 dining room table, I don't know, man. Look, if my wife said, hey, would you like to buy a $31,000 dining room table? First of all, with whose money? Right? Second of all, are you insane? Are you insane? Okay, but I get it. We're a family, and it's a government office, and presumably it's larger. And I'm not freaked out by the $31,000. They waste so much money. There's probably a $31,000 hammer somewhere in the Pentagon, right? And I think that you're right that the lying about it is the bigger problem. But a lot of times the press like focuses on this stuff, but $1.5 trillion in tax cuts for the rich is so much larger. Do you know how many dining room sets they're gonna buy with that?
The media is the rich. The media is not like us, okay? They're not like us where we're making, not with anchors on CNN and MSNBC and whatever. They're making a lot more money. There are
only a handful of people in the media making a ton of money. They're writers and watchdogs and when you hear Donald Trump talk about the media. And he says, look at these elite, rich, wealthy. Everyone in the media room listening to him was looking at like, really?
No, but you're right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that distinction because in print, there was definitely great reporting about those tax cuts and how unpopular they were, how disastrous they were, how it was a huge handout to the wealthy. But you don't see the same type of reporting on television. And think about what these television or who these television networks are owned by, which corporations they're owned by. They don't want that kind of reporting.
So that's why they report on the minor league corruption, and it's both good to point it out and also a bit of a distraction. And look, I think we're logically consistent. We point out both, and we point out the donations to the politicians being far worse because in fact here, let me give you a number that's amazing. So and talk about the scale of the real problem. In a 5-year period between 2010 and 2015, the top 200 corporations that spent money in trying to influence politicians spent $5.8 billion. Now that's a lot of money. It's the top 200 corporations. It doesn't even count all of them, right? 5.8 billion. You know how much they got back from the government in subsidies, handouts, etc.? $4.4 trillion.
God, it burns.
So that's the legalized bribery. Right. And so us looking at a couple of doors and dining room tables, it's important to point out, but it's not nearly as important as the $4.4 trillion that walked out the building because we allow bribery in this country.
I know, but just juxtapose a dining room set to food stamps for the needy. To make sure that kids have food on their plate.
They'll cut everything, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry, guys. That's such a good point because in the same week, Ben Carson put out a statement saying, hey, look, people got to pick themselves up by the bootstraps because he runs housing and urban development. He's supposed to help poor people with housing, right? And he's like, no. He was worried that they would get, they had to be weaned off the government dole.
Right.
On the government dole, he just bought a $31,000 dining room table. And the other reason why, to be fair to the media that focuses on it, by the way, including us, we're doing this story, is that it's easier to relate to a dining room table than it is a $4.4 trillion in crony capitalism.
Yeah. But the pull yourself up, I mean, this personal responsibility narrative is such a joke. These people are children with monopoly money. We taxpayers, create these fat coffers for them that they just go and, it's
and
stunning.
mandating the bootstrapper as opposed to teaching how to bootstrap are two different things.
Very true.
And when you hear somebody like Ben Carson say it, it's kind of hysterical in his position now, right?
Where he's totally unqualified.
So now we go to Mnuchin.
Yes.
And so he spent $995,000 on 8 military jet trips since taking office in last February. So they crunched the numbers on that, and it turns out he spent $2,507 per day since he's taken office on just airfare.
Right, and these are not commercial flights. These are obviously private jets. And the reason, so he was questioned about that. And he said the reason why he refuses to fly commercial is because he needs privacy in order to discuss national security matters with Trump. This is the Treasury Secretary.
There's that
and he's discussing national security. By the way, Trump doesn't want to be briefed on national security.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
So no one's buying that for a second.
So show us the phone logs of how many times he's spoken to Trump from an airplane, not from a military airplane. I mean, because I can't imagine it's maybe ever.
It's not before 11 a.m.
Right? And and if there's an emergency, you don't. I mean, it was in something we wrote or I read earlier that you don't call. It's like, oh, get me Mnuchin. The country's about to explode, right? No.
Well, I love that potential conversation. We've got trouble in Waziristan. Get Mnuchin on the line. Like, why would you call the Treasury Secretary about a national security issue like that? And what are the chances that Donald Trump knows where Waziristan is?
Right, that's true. This a good time before we go to talk about. We're talking about finances. Louise Slaughter, the eldest member of the House of Representatives, died today. A congresswoman from upstate New York, Rochester area, born in Kentucky, so she was from Rochester, and she had a thick Southern accent. She wrote the Stock Act, and the Stock Act is the act that made it illegal for members of Congress to trade on information that they got to protect consumers from not having that unfair advantage. So it all plays into this. There are people in Washington working to stop this stuff. They just don't have voices that are loud. And she was the first woman to run the Rules Committee, one of the most the most powerful committee in Congress. A pretty cool lady.
And the Trump administration, in a previous story we did, is gutting the Stock Act. So, of course. And last thing on this, I'm amazed by their lack of conscience. I guess I shouldn't be there. It's Mnuchin. He's the one that took advantage of the economic crash to profit off the foreclosures. And he worked at Goldman Sachs for a long period of time. It said he's the globalist financial elite guy that Trump was talking about during the campaign. I mean, they're like, him and his wife are like comic book villains, down to their outfits, etc. But it doesn't occur to him that, hey, charging the taxpayer $995,000 for 8 trips, eight trips
also,
on a
he's the
plane.
Secretary of Treasury, of one person who should know when you're wasting money and being stupid with money, right? The one American, right?
Right. And they do it anyway because they have no regard for you.
Yeah.
All right, let's take one more break, and when we come back, more stories for you, including a candidate who would like to arm the homeless. Who is he, and what is his reasoning?
All right, back on the Young Turks. A couple tweets. Skepticus Rex says, for $31,000, that dining room table better be able to seat all of Rhode Island. Kelly Kerr says, who was it that said with the tax cuts, families would save $1,000 so they could buy a new car or redo their kitchen? They obviously have no idea what things cost. Just ask Carson, right?
Or he just got a huge tax cut.
Ishka Bibble says, Carson says that being poor is a choice. Yeah, well, when you come out of the womb, I mean, it's a curious choice that people make.
Yeah.
And I've told this many times, but I think it's important to know. African American average 2-parent family for African Americans in this country, net worth of the family is $16,000. Same metrics for a white family. is $160,000. Wow. So when you talk about white privilege, you don't know it, but on average, you were born into a family that had 10 times the wealth of an average African American. So that's kind of how white privilege works. It doesn't mean that you're rich. It doesn't mean that everything is wonderful and rainbows and unicorns for you. It just means that it's a different situation. So when they pay a guy like Ben Carson to say being poor is a choice, right, they know it's just a sad joke and a sick joke on all of you guys, including if you're a poor white guy in the middle of West Virginia, Nebraska, or wherever. Right. And Tom Zawacki says the only reason Price got fired is because Trump was mad he was spending more on air travel than him, which is entirely possible. I spend the most on air travel. I have the best planes.
The best. They're huge, my planes.
Yeah, well, now they are.
Now
That's
they
true.
are.
Yeah. So, Sarah, what's going on lately? What are you up to?
Well, I'm doing this show, Sell by Date, and folks can find out more about where it is and where it's traveling, what I'm up to, following me on the socials. I'm on Twitter at Joan Sarah, and you should know my show kind of has multiple personalities in it, right? I even brought one of them with me. She just is a big fan.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Well, listen, hi there. My name is Lorraine Levine, and Sarah Jones brought me here today. I'm a huge fan because I remember in America where, it was actually government by the people for the people. At least, we at least pretended that was the goal. So anyway, I'm in the show Sell by Date. Come to the Geffen because I won't tell you how old I am, but I won't live forever. So come while we're running.
I'm doing this show with all these different people in it, but they're all fans, and I'm looking forward to sharing it.
And Sarah gets to do Indian accents.
I do.
Which I want to do, but I hear I'm not allowed to anymore.
You must channel your inner. Really, you have to totally believe in that democracy of 1 billion people. See how that feels inside. Then you can do it.
Okay, I gotta know that. I'm gonna come for that alone, let alone everything else. All right, and speaking of appearances, Anna is going to be on in Bernie's town hall on Monday. So we're gonna have the show normal time, 6 o'clock Eastern on Monday, but at 7 o'clock Eastern, we're gonna switch over to the Bernie Sanders town hall on income inequality, a topic we were just discussing.
There it is.
And Anna will participate in that town hall again. So make sure you're here at tytnetwork.com/live.
Is that in DC again?
Yeah.
So cool.
And then we're gonna have
awesome.
commentary, obviously. We're gonna watch it along with you guys here, then we're gonna have commentary afterwards in the studio in LA. And if you wanna learn more about the town hall, go to tytnetwork.com/inequality. Okay? All right, what's next, Anna?
There is a Senate candidate that I want to inform you about. He is a libertarian and is likely to win the endorsement of the Libertarian Party in his state. His name is Brian Ellison, and he is planning on challenging Democratic incumbent Debbie Stabenow. And he says that homeless people are constantly victims of violent crime, which is true, and it's heartwarming and encouraging to hear that there's someone who wants to do something about this, right? But he thinks that the best solution is to provide them with firearms. Okay.
God, I can't.
As if they were teachers.
Right.
All right, so let me give you the details of his proposal. And he's being serious. At first I thought maybe this was a joke, but no, he's being serious. So let's go to graphic 17. He says, frankly, I think the ideal weapon would be a pistol, but due to the licensing requirements in the state, we're going to have a hard enough time getting homeless people shotguns as it is. So he specifically wants to provide them with shotguns because the licensing requirements are a little more laxed when it comes to these shotguns. Now, Ellison said he and his team would aim to pre-qualify homeless people who wanted shotguns and were deemed suitable candidates to own them. So there's the issue of providing the guns, right? But then where do they get the ammunition for these guns? Well, Ellison's always thinking, he did think about this, and he realized that they would provide these individuals with a limited amount of bullets. And if they are caught using those bullets to shoot cans or anything other than someone who is posing a risk or a threat, then they would no longer give them bullets.
Okay, they're gonna get 5 or 6 shell magazines. First, let's note for the record that this guy's a very stable genius. But you're gonna get 5 or 6 shell magazines. And he's like, now, if they run out of them defending themselves, then we'll give them more bullets. Really? They're gonna shoot 5 or 6 people? And then like, my God, okay, this guy, I mean, to be fair, he fired twice in one time, so 3 people are dead. Now finally we can give the guy new bullets because he used them well. Right. And he says that he settled on pump action shotguns for practicality purposes. Because how else would a homeless person kill someone if he didn't have a pump action shotgun?
Yeah, so again, it has more to do with the licensing requirements in the state. So if you have a pistol, you have to get it licensed, and in order to get it licensed, you need to have an address. And if you're homeless, you don't have an address. So he's actually thought through some of the details, which is amazing.
He also said he's gonna sort of poll them to see if it's something they want, because he doesn't want to force it on them.
He said that's right. He said they will not be forced to carry shotguns. Well, thank you, we appreciate it.
So he's gonna go among the homeless and say, hey, you guys want guns?
I can't. I mean, I just want to go back to what Michael said. Like, we're at a place now where, like, of course he cares, and I think that's fantastic. This is total madness. Teachers being armed, it's not a solution. Every statistic shows us that when you put the gun in the person's hands, you increase their risk of death or injury. But I mean, you're basically throwing fuel on the problem.
Exactly.
And let me also bring up another thing. So, these are homeless people. They're unfortunately living on the street. What happens when they're asleep and their weapon is there? Like, who's gonna prevent another person from obtaining that weapon illegally? And I mean, this is such a terrible idea.
Trading their guns for alcohol or drugs or money, selling their gun.
Right.
Without
you think they're gonna go through the proper registration to sell the gun?
Right.
Or are they just gonna say, this is my private gun show?
The Skid Row loophole.
Yeah.
So one more quote from candidate Ellison. He says, are you worried about the police being armed with military weapons? I am. The world we live in is a scary world where the police, who used to dress in short sleeve shirts and carry a revolver, now have long rifles with scopes and bulletproof vests and armored vehicles. And quite frankly, that scares me much more than a homeless person trying to defend themselves with a shotgun. I think you can be scared of both.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to be scared of both.
I'm definitely terrified of both. I'm going with like both.
But just putting more guns into society.
Amazing.
Yeah, so look, I want to be clear about something. I don't even think this Ellison guy has bad intent or is a bad guy overall. Look, he says a lot of things that are interesting. He's worried about over militarizing the cops. He is a libertarian, so he thinks we're doing too much foreign intervention. I looked into him, okay? And he cares about minority civil rights. Those are all wonderful things. But he genuinely believes that the answer is always a gun, right? Is some sort of weapon. And so, like we care about the homeless intensely, and so we think maybe a home,
just a thought, some food, a home, some healthcare.
And I don't say that just like flippantly. Utah, Salt Lake City, actually built homes for the homeless and found that it was incredibly cost efficient.
Yes.
It solved a lot of their medical problems. It solved a lot of the services that you would normally have to provide, and it was like this counterintuitive idea of like, they're homeless. Why don't we give them homes, right? And it turned out to be genius. Other places are trying homes to cut down on emergency room costs, et cetera, providing some funding for rentals, et cetera. So there's so many different ways to address it, but let's also be realistic, and we've talked about this a lot. A lot of the homeless are mentally ill. They didn't choose to be there, they just have an issue, and but they also have rights, and it's really complicated, and you want to help them, but you want to respect their rights, et cetera. But I think the very last thing you want to do to help mentally ill homeless people is to give them a weapon, because I thought of it selfishly, to be honest, like the idea of walking in LA's downtown or in San Francisco with homeless people with shotguns does not sound good to me. I'm keeping it real on that. But you guys made a good point that they're actually more likely to hurt themselves, because that's actually what happens when people own guns. Sarah made the point. She's right. 500 people die every single year in America from accidental gunshot wounds. To give you a sense of context, this is amazing. All gun deaths in Japan combined, even if you triple their population to equal ours, is only 39.
Wow.
Whereas we have 500 deaths every year from just accidents, let alone homicides and suicides, which is over 30,000.
It's amazing.
I learned today that the NRA, when they hold their convention, gun violence goes down around the country every year during the 5 days of the NRA convention every year.
Wow.
I'm researching. Isn't it amazing? I'm researching because I'm going to cover it this year and the convention in Dallas. And when I learned that fact, and I was supported by lots of other research.
Correlation does not equal causation, Michael.
I'm so sorry.
And if
right,
you say that, they will shoot you
They will
or
exactly,
arm
yeah.
a homeless
Never
man to
mind.
do likewise.
Exactly. I was going to say, get some homeless folks on the payroll.
And thank you for that point about it's just a health issue, right? Mental health is just a health issue that needs to be destigmatized. Put guns in the hands of folks who actually just need care.
And plus the gun control opponents are saying, no, we have to deal with the mentally ill. This is not how you deal with the mentally ill. Right?
Well, but in America, on a macro scale, we have a mental health problem.
Of course we do.
Because we think that the right answer for everything, including homelessness driven by mental illness, oh, it's okay, I got the solution. Give him a gun. Give him a shotgun while you're at it. And that'll solve it. Because the answer is always further weaponry.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
All right, one more story.
All right. A Democrat has stepped up in Maine to challenge a Republican candidate for a state House seat. Now, the reason why this particular race is catching headlines is because Leslie Gibson, the Republican candidate, recently was criticized for some of the statements he made on Twitter in regard to the survivors of the mass shooting that took place in Parkland, Florida. Now, what he said infuriated one woman so much that she decided to challenge him because she realized that he was running unopposed. Her name is Erin Gilchrist, and there she is. She's the Democratic candidate. And she met the Thursday filing deadline to place her name on the ballot against Leslie Gibson, who until then had been running unopposed. Gibson put himself in the spotlight earlier this month by verbally attacking the two Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school students on Twitter. And the two that we're referring to are Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg. So here's what he had to say about Emma Gonzalez, and it was disgusting. Again, this was on Twitter. He wrote, "There is nothing about this skinhead lesbian that impresses me, and there is nothing that she has to say unless you're frothing at the mouth, Moonbat. Unless you're a frothing at the mouth, Moonbat." Now, I want to share a video. It's a montage of Emma Gonzalez, so you can kind of get a sense of why the right wing hates her so much and why I absolutely love her. Take a look.
What do you think about this idea of arming teachers?
It's stupid.
Why?
First of all, Douglas ran out of paper for like 2 weeks in the school year, and now all of a sudden they have $400 million to pay for teachers to get trained to arm themselves? Really? Really? I want you to know that we will support your two children in the way that we will not. You will not. Do you keep it in a lockbox or do you carry it on your person? If the teacher dies and a student who's a good student is able to get the gun, are they now held responsible to shoot the student who's come into the door?
I think I'm just gonna interrupt you real quick and remind you that the question is actually, do you believe it should be harder to obtain these semi-automatic weapons and modifications to make them fully automatic, such as bump stocks?
I love her. I mean, first of all, Emma for president, but also, can I move to Maine fast enough to vote for Erin Gilchrist? Like how much, you know what I mean? How much time do I need?
Wait till June. Though.
Okay, I'll wait till June. Right.
I think Erin actually has a good chance of winning. I'll tell you why. One, Maine has public financing, so anybody's got a shot, which is great. Maine. And the private financing of elections. Secondly, the number one problem the local candidates have is no media attention. So the person with more money usually wins because they have a bigger megaphone and the media doesn't cover the local races. So here, in her case, problem solved. Everybody's focusing on that small local race in Maine. So I think Erin's got a perfectly good shot at winning that race, which is great.
Thank God.
How great would it be if a citizen who's 28 years old got motivated to action, and she said she had no interest in politics before, but saw that he was running unopposed, was like, we can't let this stand. and got into the race. I'm telling you, I think she is I can't wait for election night when I tell you, hey, remember that story of the guy who called Emma Gonzalez a skinhead lesbian? Well, that's the former representative from Maine. That would be fantastic. And I want to know something that I just realized as we're doing this story. We try really hard to not say the names of the shooters after the first day or first couple of days of coverage. And I think that we've done a pretty decent job at it, not perfect. And I think the media is now heading in that direction overall, which I'm thrilled about. We've been talking about it for a decade on the show. But for the first time, we have victims' names that are much more recognizable than the shooters' names. So Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg and some of the other students are now really well known, which is amazing. And in fact, what triggered, if you will, this Republican to attack Gonzalez was that Gonzalez's Twitter handle had more followers than the NRA's. And that was the news story that made him a special little snowflake, and he needed a safe space from. So that's why he was like, oh, I can't believe this. Lesbian has more than my beloved NRA. Because conservatives are so obsessed with like Twitter following. Trump and these guys, who's got more on Twitter?
This is a little bit of a tangent, but I had to bring it up because someone made this point on Facebook, and I thought it was such a fabulous point. Following this shooting in Parkland, Florida, there were people on the right that were arguing that one of the issues is that, this kid was bullied. He was tortured by the bullying, and if people were just better toward him, treated him better, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But remember, it's the right wing that moans about snowflakes non-stop. Like, oh, special little snowflakes. Oh, do we have to worry about your feelings? So, you can't use that argument when it's convenient for you. And this was not an issue of a kid being bullied. This was an issue of someone who had no reason to have any access to a gun, being able to easily and legally purchase one. So,
Anna, that's such a great point. I hadn't thought of that in that way either. Which is their main argument is, no, it's not a gun control issue. Because if we just given the bully a safe space, right? Or the shooter a safe space from bullies, they claim, right? I think that when you shoot 17 people, you're the bully. But in the topsy-turvy conservative world, he was the poor kid. If he just had a safe space, he'd have been okay.
And by the way, the same argument was made when that shooter in Santa Barbara did what he did. And he had made videos about how women wouldn't give him a chance or other female students wouldn't give him a chance. And there were people on the right that empathized with him. So where's your snowflake argument now?
They have selective empathy. They love to trot it out when it's convenient for them.
Yes.
That's exactly right. All right, everybody check out Buy, Sell, Date by Sarah Jones.
Sell by date. It's a tricky.
Sell by date.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, like I said, because of the play on words. All right, and Michael Schur on I-24.
Yeah, I24news.tv. Come find us.
So when we come back, whole new power panel. Simone Boyce is here. Gina Grad is here.
Gina Grad is here.
Yes. And we got some amazing stories for you guys, including some of these people who participated in the National School Walkout receiving corporal punishment. They were beaten by school administrators for participating in the walkout.
Beaten is a very strong word. They were spanked.
They were swatted.
Okay, that's a better word.
Yeah.
Well,
they're trying to avoid one form of violence. They get, it's like, come on.
Yeah, violence. There's one thing I know: violence is the answer.
Always in America.
All right, guys, we'll be right back.